It began like any other eco-tour. Sun-soaked brochures, bug spray, and too much optimism for strangers crammed into a fiberglass boat. I had signed up on impulse, a last-minute getaway from deadlines, smog, and the noise of the city. The Mangrove tour promised quiet canals, crocodile sightings, and a brush with nature that felt remote yet safe. Harmless, predictable. The boat's fiberglass hull creaked as we pushed off from the dock. It was the first run of the season. Our guide, a wiry man named Luis with sun-leathered skin and an encyclopedic knowledge of birds, waved his arm toward the narrow green corridors ahead. Watch the trees. They breathe through their roots. They remember everyone who walks here. We laughed, some politely, some nervously. There were 8 of us, a couple in matching khakis who couldn't stop filming, an older man who kept sketching in a leather notebook, a bored teen with headphones jammed into his ears, a woman with a camcorder and a voice recorder she whispered into every few minutes. And then there was her. She boarded last. Slender, mid-30s maybe, dressed plainly, no logo hats, no bulky gear, just dark linen and a canvas satchel. Her hair was pinned back, face bare. Her eyes, I don't know how to describe them, calm, like deep water. She offered a brief smile to each of us, then took the empty seat beside me. I nodded hello. She didn't speak, but the smile lingered. The day was bright, the air thick with salt and mud. Mangroves loomed like skeletal fingers reaching skyward. Herons clacked and leapt between trees, wings flashing like banners. Luis pointed out the nests of egrets, the slick heads of river otters, the crusted shells of ancient oysters clinging to twisted roots. It was beautiful in that strange, wild way, like we were drifting through a world untouched by time. I was just starting to relax when my foot slipped. We'd stopped at a wooden dock to stretch our legs. The planks, slick with algae, offered little grip. I was reaching for my bag when my boot caught a wet patch and my body pitched sideways toward the green-black water. Panic flared. I saw the splash coming. But then, a hand grabbed my arm, not just grabbed, clamped like iron. I looked up into her face. Her expression was unreadable, but her grip was absolute. She hauled me upright in one clean movement, as if I weighed nothing. "Careful," she said softly, brushing algae from my sleeve. "These waters don't forgive." I mumbled a thank you, heart racing. Luis cracked a joke to ease the tension, and the group laughed it off. But I caught her watching me a second longer than necessary, her gaze unreadable. We climbed back onto the boat. My pulse stayed elevated. I told myself it was the near fall, not her uncanny strength or the way she never broke a sweat. The tour resumed. Deeper now, the light changed. Canopy thickened overhead, filtering sunlight into streaks and shafts. Dragonflies skimmed the surface. The air cooled. Luis's voice floated across the quiet water. "The locals say this place has old magic, spirits in the roots, echoes in the tides." More polite laughter. I caught sight of something then. Movement at the corner of my eye, a shape, upright, humanoid, standing impossibly still between the trees. I turned. Nothing, just bark and shade and the hiss of water against the hull. "Probably a monkey," I muttered. She leaned closer. "There are no monkeys here." I looked at her. She was smiling again, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. We passed through the tunnels of mangroves for hours. Roots rose like prison bars. The water, glassy and dark, reflected only sky and leaves. Something about it felt too still, like it was watching back. More shapes teased the corners of my vision, but when I tried to focus, there was nothing. Just birds and breeze. By the time Luis cut the engine and pointed to our campsite for the night, a patch of dry land framed by thick mangrove trunks. I was already half convinced I'd imagined the unease, but when she helped me off the boat, her hand briefly touched mine. Cold. Not from water, from something else. "Sleep well tonight," she whispered. A chill spidered up my spine. She turned away, gentle as ever, and I, stupidly, told myself it was just the swamp playing tricks on my nerves. We set up camp under the fading light, the sky bleeding tangerine behind the jagged silhouettes of the mangroves. Luis moved like a man used to routine, pitching tents, starting a small fire in a raised pit, distributing rations with cheerful efficiency. Still, his eyes kept scanning the waterline like he expected it to change. We all did our part. I helped unroll sleeping mats, shaking out damp canvas while the bugs began their nightly symphony. Someone lit a citronella coil. The khaki couple bickered over how to use the water purifier. The teen tapped out some message on his dead phone. No signal here, of course. The woman, my rescuer, moved with quiet purpose, settling near the fire's edge with a thermos in her lap, the flame casting gentle gold across her features. By the time the last light slipped away, the swamp had changed. Gone was the shimmering, vibrant labyrinth of the afternoon. The mangroves stood hunched and ancient, their shadows twisted into unnatural poses. Their roots, now fully exposed by the tide, curled like petrified limbs reaching for something unseen. And the sounds. God, the sounds. What had once been birdsong and breeze was now a chorus of unplaceable noises, low croaks, rhythmic drips, rustling branches where there was no wind. We sat around the fire, but the conversation died early. Luis told us it was best not to wander, that the swamp could confuse you at night. "Stick to the firelight," he said, jabbing a stick into the flames. "Out there, it's easy to forget direction, even who you are." The teen snorted. "Sounds like a bad movie." Luis didn't smile. He just added another piece of driftwood to the flames. I went to bed early, or tried to. Sleep came in jagged pieces. First, the heat. My tent felt like a damp lung, thick with humidity. Sweat clung to me. The sounds outside, chirps, slaps of water, that strange half-animal wailing, kept my brain lit with paranoia. Then the dream. I was walking barefoot through the black water, chest deep, the roots arching overhead like the ribs of a long-dead beast. Everything was silent. Even my steps made no sound. My skin crawled with invisible insects. Somewhere ahead, a voice was calling my name. "Hey, hey, hey." Female, distant, familiar. I turned again, but saw nothing. Only pale shapes in the dark, barely glimpsed. Faces, maybe, or masks. Some shimmered with half-recognition, like old photos submerged in brine. I tried to speak, but my mouth filled with water. The roots closed in. Then I woke, gasping, my face slick with sweat. The fire had gone out. I sat upright in the tent, heart thundering. Every sound outside seemed magnified. The creak of trees, a splash too close to be a fish, the sigh of something brushing the canvas wall. My breath fogged the air, though the heat hadn't broken. Just a dream, I told myself. Just a dream. Still, I crawled out of the tent. A thin mist had risen over the ground, blurring the outlines of trees and tents alike. The world was silver and gray, as if drained of warmth. I could just make out a few silhouettes curled in their sleeping bags. She sat by the dead fire, knees drawn to her chest, watching the embers. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, barely a whisper. I shook my head. She didn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the coals, like she could see shapes forming in them. "This place, it pulls dreams from you." "You felt it too?" Her head tilted slightly. "They never stop calling once they know your name." I waited for a smile, a joke. There was none. She reached into her satchel and handed me a canteen. "Drink. It'll help." I took it with shaking hands and sipped. The water was cold, clean, refreshing in a way I couldn't quite explain. "Thanks," I muttered. She finally looked at me. "Be careful. Don't follow voices here, no matter who they sound like." "What does that mean?" But she had already turned back to the fire, the moment sealed behind silence. By dawn, the mist was gone. The sun broke over the mangroves as if the night had never happened. The camp was alive with movement, coffee being brewed, boots being tightened, repellent reapplied. No one mentioned bad dreams. No one else seemed to have them. But when she caught my eye across the clearing, I saw it. The faint crease in her brow, the way her hand trembled just once before she tucked it out of view. She remembered, just like I did. And neither of us said a word. We broke camp as the sun reached its zenith, the humid air already clinging to our clothes like a second skin. Luis claimed there was a spring-fed pond a few hours upstream, a good spot for lunch. Spirits were high. The worst of the heat was ahead, but the mosquitoes weren't too bad yet, and the canopy overhead gave us moments of mottled shade. No one mentioned the strangeness of the night before. No one except her. As we shoved off from the bank, she leaned over and said quietly, "They'll come again tonight." I didn't answer. I didn't have one. The boat engine droned, muffled by the thick forest. Branches scraped the hull. Luis steered us through a maze of narrow channels. The mangroves crowded tighter here, their roots rising like cages, their trunks leaning inward like eavesdropping giants. Birds watched from high branches. The sky narrowed. An hour in, I started noticing things. It began small, a familiar bend in the river that we had already passed. A cluster of roots that looked identical to one from earlier. A tree trunk with a scar shaped like a crescent moon that we passed again, 30 minutes after the first time. "Didn't we already go through here?" I asked Luis. He frowned, glanced at the GPS tracker clipped to his belt. No, we're good. The swamp just likes its patterns. You see the same stuff because it repeats. Nature does that." I didn't argue, but I started counting turns. Left, right, then another right, then a left, then another left, and again. The same heron launched from the same branch, twice. Its wings made the same sound, a dry flap, like parchment. The woman sat beside me in the boat's middle bench, eyes closed, face turned to the filtered sunlight. "Something's wrong," I muttered. Her eyes flicked open. "Yes, but it's subtle. That's how it starts." Luis called for a break. We docked at a narrow stretch of land, a muddy spit barely raised above the waterline. While the others stretched their legs, I walked a few steps inland to fill my canteen at a trickling freshwater stream Luis had pointed out. The canopy overhead whispered with insects and birds. I bent to scoop water, letting it run over my fingers. When I looked up again, the world had changed. The trees were wrong. They'd shifted somehow, taller, closer, darker. The underbrush was too dense, the shadows too thick. My path back to the bank had vanished. What the hell? I spun slowly, gripping my canteen like a weapon. Then I heard her. "This way." Her voice, just beyond the trees, but not fearful, not urgent, calm. I pushed through the foliage and stumbled out onto the bank. Everything was back to normal. The group sat in a circle, chewing granola bars. Luis waved a hand. "You okay?" "You disappeared for a second. Thought we'd lost you to a crocodile." I nodded numbly. She was standing apart, staring out into the water, arms crossed. I walked over. Did something just happen to you?" She looked at me with that same unreadable calm. "You felt the rearranging. Good." "Rearranging?" She didn't explain. Instead, she crouched by the water and let her fingers trail through it. The ripples warped strangely, like oil on the surface. When she stood, the distortion vanished. We boarded again, pushing deeper. The trees grew thicker, their roots higher above the water, gnarled and bristling like antlers. Luis tried to keep up a commentary, pointing out snake nests and rare orchids, but his voice faltered more often. He checked his compass twice in 5 minutes. He was sweating. Everyone else seemed relaxed, lulled by the engine's hum and the slow rock of the boat. But I kept seeing things. At one point, as we rounded a bend, I glanced over my shoulder and saw myself standing in the trees, watching the boat glide past. Just for a second. Then it was gone. I said nothing. At another point, the teen with the headphones stood suddenly and pointed. "Did you see that? There was a girl over there. She had no face." Luis cursed. "Sit down, kid. Probably a reflection. These waters are full of weird light." But the teen sat slowly, pale and trembling. The woman's hand briefly touched my arm. "It's getting closer." "What is?" She didn't answer. She never did. We made camp late, at a place Luis swore was the right spot. But I noticed the land was wrong again. The trees were wrong. The stars overhead didn't quite match the patterns I remembered. No one else commented. No one else noticed. Or maybe they did and were afraid to say. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I watched her as she sat at the edge of camp, staring into the darkness. The wind never touched her hair, and when I finally blinked and looked again, she was gone. I stumbled from my tent, boots squelching in the muddy earth, heart punching hard against my ribs. The others were still sleeping or pretending to. The fire had burned down to soft embers. No sign of her, no rustle of movement, no footprints in the silt. I scanned the water line. Nothing. Only the trees, their roots rising like dead fingers from the black water. I almost called her name. But something in me resisted, like speaking aloud would invite attention from something waiting in the shadows. So I sat down beside the fire, back to the trees, trying to listen past the insect drone and the dull splash of distant fish. 20 minutes passed. She returned. No sound, no warning. One moment I was alone, the next she was beside me, walking out of the dark like she'd never left. No flashlight, no gear, her linen clothes still dry. "You were gone," I whispered. She stared at the coals, face unreadable. "I was just watching." "Watching what?" She didn't answer. I didn't press. In the morning, Luis looked worried. He didn't say it outright, but I could see the tension in the way he kept checking the map, the compass, the sun's arc through the leaves. He asked if anyone had heard the engine during the night. "No," said the khaki man. "Why?" Luis muttered something about the backup boat drifting. I watched him search the shoreline, jaw clenched. "Shouldn't it be tethered?" I asked. He didn't answer. The group packed up. There was less chatter. The camcorder woman asked if we were behind schedule. Luis offered a vague assurance. We paddled now, engine off. He said the water was too shallow for the propeller, but we'd been deeper yesterday. I remembered the bend where I'd seen myself watching from the trees. The water had been 6 feet at least. Now it barely lapped over the roots. "I don't think this is the same place," I muttered. She looked at me, then past me, toward the far-off shimmer of insect wings above the water. "No," she said. "It's deeper, just pretending not to be." The others didn't hear, or pretended not to. By mid-afternoon, Luis finally stopped paddling. He sat still, hands on the oars, staring at the trees. The branches creaked overhead. Something called out in the distance, a wet, low sound, like someone exhaling into a bucket. Luis checked his radio. Static. Switched to his satellite phone. No signal. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "What doesn't?" asked the teen. "We should have hit the channel by now. This isn't on any map." He showed us the GPS. The screen flickered. The marker blinked in place, unmoving. "But we've been going north," I said. Luis shook his head slowly. The compass has spun 3 times. Look, the needle twitched, then began to rotate. Panic broke like a fever. Voices rose. The camcorder woman demanded to retrace our route. The khaki couple accused Luis of lying. The teen pulled at his hair, muttering that he just wanted to go home. I looked around and realized something horrible. I didn't recognize the trees. Not a single one. Not the bent trunk. Not the spindly roots. Everything looked grown over. Older than before. Wrong. Luis stood, hands shaking. We make camp. Tonight we stay together. We'll get our bearings in the morning. No one argued. We found a patch of dry land, just barely above the waterline. The light was fading fast, turning green, then grey. Shadows curled under roots. We didn't speak much during dinner. Luis didn't eat. He kept glancing at the water. The teen sat with his headphones in, but no music played. Just dead silence in his earbuds. The camcorder woman muttered to herself, clutching her recorder like a lifeline. She sat beside me, calm as ever, hands folded neatly. It doesn't want us to leave, she said. What does? I asked. She looked up. Her face was pale in the firelight. The in-between. The place where the tide forgets. Are you just messing with me? She didn't answer. Later, as we lay in our tents, the swamp came alive. Whispers. Not the rustle of animals or the creak of branches. These were syllables, words half heard. My name, repeated faintly in a dozen different voices. Male, female, childlike. Some were versions of my own voice, distorted like echoes underwater. At first I thought it was a dream, but the sound came from outside the tent. I sat up, held my breath. Something moved past the nylon walls, slow, dragging steps in shallow water. The others were silent, not snoring, not shifting, just still. I gripped the flashlight but didn't turn it on. If I saw it, I wasn't sure I'd survive it. And then the voice closest to the tent whispered, very clearly, "She's not what you think." The next morning, the boat was gone. Not just untethered, gone, vanished. No scrape marks, no drift lines, nothing but water and the faint outlines of roots. Luis broke. He threw the GPS into the mud and screamed into the trees. We tried the radio, the satellite phone, banged pots together, fired a flare. Nothing. And through it all, she watched quietly. She came to sit beside me as I stared into the motionless water, numb. "We can't keep following him," she said. "Luis is the guide." Her voice was calm. "But the forest is guiding him now?" I looked at her. For the first time, I noticed something wrong in her reflection. A delay, a shimmer, like her outline didn't quite align. "What are you?" I asked before I could stop myself. She tilted her head, smiled, still deciding. We didn't speak of the boat. It was easier that way. Luis had retreated into himself, silent, mechanical, paddling without conviction whenever we tried to move. The khaki couple fought in terse whispers. The camcorder woman recorded everything, even when no one was talking, as if she expected the recorder to catch more than our words. The teen hadn't removed his earbuds since dawn. He stared at the trees like they were speaking to him. I felt the shift, deep in my stomach, a sense of being unmoored from time. I'd blink, and the sun would have changed position. I'd walk a few steps to urinate behind the brush, and when I returned, the fire would be out, replaced by embers. Once, I reached for my canteen and found it already empty, though I couldn't recall drinking from it. When I asked Luis what time it was, he didn't answer. Later, I found his watch discarded in the mud. The second hand was ticking backward. The woman, still nameless, remained my tether. She seemed untouched by the fatigue, the despair, the feverish logic loops the rest of us were trapped in. When I spiraled, she steadied me. When I panicked, She hummed softly, some lilting foreign tune that felt older than language. And yet, I began noticing things. We were all ragged now, bitten, filthy, streaked with sweat and mud, except her. Her clothes remained unstained, her hair never tangled, her skin, pale and smooth, bore no welts or scratches. One afternoon, as we huddled on the muddy ridge waiting for the storm to pass, she told me a story. "When I was little," she began, "I lived near a salt marsh. My father said the marsh drank people, slowly, not all at once. First your time, then your name, then your shadow, until you didn't know you'd ever been anything else." I laughed weakly. "That's dark." She looked at me. "It's true." The storm broke then, sheets of rain hammering down, warm and relentless. The world dissolved into wet blur. We covered our supplies with plastic tarps. Luis knelt in the mud, clutching the compass, muttering, "North, north, north." I huddled under the tarp with her. The teen had wandered off earlier. We hadn't noticed. By the time we realized he was gone, the rain had stopped. Luis and the camcorder woman searched the nearby grove. They returned empty-handed. The couple argued about whether he'd even existed in the first place. I sat beside the woman, watching her clean a fish she hadn't caught. "We should look again," I said. "No," she said simply. "He isn't meant to return." That night someone, or something, walked through our camp. I heard the slosh of footsteps around 3 a.m. just outside my tent. They circled twice, paused near my head, then moved on. The next morning, we found Luis's backpack shredded, his map soaked and torn. The flare gun was missing. He insisted it had been animals, but he was shaking as he said it. I confronted her. "Where were you last night?" She tilted her head. "Here." "Sleeping?" She didn't blink. "Do you sleep when something is watching?" I didn't answer. Later, I caught her staring into the fire. Her face slack, blank, mouth slightly open. Her eyes flickered orange, not from the flames, from something deeper. Then she blinked, smiled at me, and asked if I wanted more soup. I nearly said no, but I was starving. We ate in silence. I watched her lips move as she whispered something I couldn't hear. The soup tasted strange, metallic, faintly sweet. The others didn't seem to notice. By the time the moon rose, one of the khaki couple was gone. Just gone. His wife woke screaming, shaking an empty sleeping bag. We searched for hours, yelling, calling his name, but the forest swallowed every sound. His camera lay at the water's edge. The lens was cracked. Inside were photos, selfies, landscape shots, images of birds and trees. And one, buried between them all, of the woman. She was standing ankle-deep in the swamp, facing the camera, but her face was wrong, blurred, stretched, like it couldn't decide what shape to be. Her limbs seemed too long, too thin. Her shadow didn't match the angle of the sun. Luis dropped the camera. We didn't speak the rest of the day. That night the forest moaned, not animals, not wind, the trees themselves. Their trunks vibrated with low, resonant groans like timbers of an old ship. The sound settled in our chests, made the ground tremble. Someone whimpered in the dark. I clutched my knees to my chest, watching the fire sputter. The woman sat just beyond the ring of light, eyes glinting. I asked her, "What's happening to us?" She smiled softly. "You're starting to see clearly." I wanted to scream, to grab her, shake her, demand answers. But something in her eyes rooted me in place, something old, something vast. I lay down but did not sleep, because now I knew. She was not lost like us. She was home. By morning, nothing made sense. The trees had shifted again, entire root systems rearranged like furniture overnight. We woke to find our camp bisected by a new waterway that hadn't existed the evening before. Luis tried to trace it, walking 30 feet before reappearing on the opposite side, drenched and shaken. "It's looping," he mumbled. we're inside something. The camcorder woman, her recorder now cracked and silent, just rocked back and forth beside the smoldering fire. I asked her if she had any footage left. She didn't seem to hear me. Her eyes were focused on something behind my shoulder. I didn't turn to look. She appeared beside me then, the woman in linen, just as silently as she had vanished the first time. She offered me a strip of dried fruit from her satchel. I hadn't seen her gather any. "Thank you," I said, not touching it. She nodded toward the trees. "Today it begins to fray." "What does?" She smiled. "The pretending." We attempted to move again. Luis insisted the river lay just ahead. His voice trembled under the weight of forced authority. The sun burned above us, but even that seemed unreal. A fixed brightness with no warmth, like a stage light. The shadows it cast did not match our movement. Luis led. The rest followed in silence. The woman walked beside me. "How long have we been here?" I asked. She tilted her head. "How long does it feel?" "Days." She said nothing. "More?" Still, she said nothing. We passed through a corridor of trees that narrowed impossibly. Their roots pressed in from the water, leaving just enough space for us to wade waist-deep. The mud sucked at our legs like wet mouths. Then, ahead, a light, a structure. "A cabin?" Luis shouted and began to run. The rest of us followed, hope rising like steam from our bodies. It was real. A raised shack on wooden stilts, half swallowed by vines and rot. Curtains in the window, a door hanging open, a rope ladder swaying slightly, as if someone had just climbed it. I looked at the woman. She had stopped walking. "Aren't you coming?" I asked. Her face was blank. "This part is for you." We reached the cabin. Luis scrambled up first, disappearing inside. The camcorder woman hesitated, then followed. Inside, it was cool and shadowed. Dust motes floated in air that didn't move, a lantern on the table unlit, a map on the wall, hand-drawn with a single word scrawled across it in red ink: "Return." Luis paced. "We rest here. Tonight we plan. We mark everything. The camcorder woman screamed. We turned. She stood frozen by a mirror, an antique thing bolted to the wall, its surface warped. In the glass, she had no reflection. I looked into it. My face flickered, first normal, then older, then younger, then not mine at all. Just a mask of skin stretched over something pulsing and wet. Luis smashed the mirror with the butt of a flare gun. We camped beneath the cabin that night, too afraid to sleep inside. The wind moaned through the trees like it was searching for someone. I saw shapes in the water. One wore Luis's face. Another wore mine. Around midnight, I woke to see the woman standing knee-deep in the dark shallows, arms raised toward the canopy. I didn't call to her. Her lips were moving in slow, rhythmic patterns. A chant. A name repeated again and again. My name. When I blinked, she was gone. But the water still rippled outward, as if something had just stepped in. We left the cabin at first light. The camcorder woman vanished an hour later. No scream, no splash. Just one moment she was trudging behind me, and the next, nothing, not even footprints. Her recorder lay in the mud, whispering static. Luis picked it up, held it to his ear, then dropped it like it burned him. He didn't speak the rest of the day. By dusk, it was just me, Luis, and the woman. We sat beside a dwindling fire on a patch of raised root, surrounded by water. Luis finally broke the silence. "You knew this would happen." The woman didn't respond. "You brought us here." Still silence. Luis stood, wild-eyed. "Say something." She looked up at him with pity. "You already know." Luis screamed and ran into the swamp. We heard the splash, then the silence. Not even a ripple remained. I stared at her. "What are you?" She tilted her head, the same gesture she always used. But this time it wasn't charming. It was alien. I'm what's left when you stop pretending. I didn't sleep. She sat across from me, motionless, waiting. The fire had long since died. She hadn't moved. Her eyes never left mine. I told myself if I just stayed awake, I could outlast her. But sometime just before dawn, I must have blinked. Just once. When I opened my eyes, she was gone. The air was heavy with mist. The swamp stretched in all directions, unfamiliar, infinite. Roots shifted like slow, submerged beasts beneath the water's glassy skin. I stood on trembling legs and called her name, not because I expected an answer, but because silence had become unbearable. Then I heard it. My voice. Calling back. The exact inflection, the exact fear. I spun, heart in my throat, but found only trees. The voice faded into low laughter, soft, feminine, and very near. I started walking, not in any direction. There were no directions anymore, just instinct and the pounding certainty that I had to keep moving. The swamp responded. The trees twisted as I passed. Their roots reached subtly, arching toward my ankles. Shadows shifted when I wasn't looking directly at them. Faces bloomed and disappeared in the bark, and then I saw her. She stood in the water up to her waist, arms spread like a saint, head tilted back. Her eyes were open, unblinking, staring straight into the canopy. Around her, the water boiled without heat. I froze. "What are you?" She turned to me slowly, as if underwater. "I told you," she said, her voice resonant, layered, echoing from every direction. "I am what remains, what the roots remember, what the water refuses to forget." "You brought us here," I said, teeth clenched. "You did this. I am this." The air pulsed. From the trees, shapes emerged, human shapes but hollow, silhouettes of those who had vanished, the teen, the khaki man, Luis, even the camcorder woman, her face blank, her eyes reflective like frog skin. They stood at the edge of the water, motionless. The woman approached me. Her feet didn't ripple the surface. "Why me?" I asked. "You followed the voice." "I didn't know." "You listened." The sky flickered, not with lightning, but with memory. I saw flashes, my reflection in the warped mirror, my hand taking the canteen she offered, my voice whispering in dreams not my own. Each moment, an invitation. "You said I had a choice." She stopped a foot from me. "You still do." The figures behind her leaned forward as one, as if drawn by tide. I ran. Roots rose like walls. Branches pulled at my hair. The air thickened, turned syrupy. I broke through cattails, leapt over submerged logs, stumbled, fell, rose again. The swamp fought me with every step. Behind me, the water whispered. My name, over and over. The sky began to lighten, not with dawn, but with something pale and sickly, like bone. Still, I ran. Then, open space. A clearing of cracked mud and bent reeds, steaming in the false morning, and in the center, the boat. My breath caught. It was the same fiberglass hull, empty, scratched, half submerged, but whole. I didn't question it. I lunged forward, scrambling inside, grabbing the faded oars. From the trees, she watched. She stood just at the edge, as if some unseen border held her back. "You can leave," she said, voice softer now. "But you'll take me with you." I paused, oars dripping. "No, you already did." I pushed off. The water resisted. The current coiled like a fist around the boat. But something gave way. The mangroves loosened. The trees drew back like a breath held too long. And I was moving. Fast. The canopy broke. Sunlight, real sunlight, slammed into me like a blessing. My eyes burned. Birds I recognized called from branches I could name. Then, shore. I collapsed into the mud, trembling, sobbing. A ranger found me hours later, dehydrated, delirious, talking nonsense about spirits and echoes. They said I'd been missing for 2 days. Only 2. But when I checked my reflection in the hospital mirror, I didn't recognize my own eyes. Something deep inside them had shifted, tilted like the trees in that place. And later, alone, when I unpacked my ruined gear, I found it. A single black mangrove leaf, still wet, and in my head, faint as breath. Her voice. "Next time, don't blink.